What's up, everybody? It's Dr. Octillery here. I'm going to be going over what I believe to be the worst cards in Marvel Snap for each cost. Okay, so I'm just going to run through cost 1 through 6 and pick out what I believe just to be the worst cards. You know they're bad because you look at them and they just don't look impressive, right? Their abilities, you're just like, ugh, that's gross. You don't even really want to test them out too much. And really, the verification is that you never play against these, okay? And especially once you're in pool 3, you just never see these cards. Your opponent will never have these cards. Maybe you see it if it pops out of X Mansion or something from a location or Agent 13 or something. But these cards are just so bad. Nobody uses them. Everyone talks crap on them, and they need some buffs, okay? They need some changes. Second Dinner needs to do these characters justice. So we're going to start at cost 1. We're going to be looking at Hawkeye. Hawkeye's just not very good. You know, you unlock him early in the game, and you play him a little bit. A 1-3 doesn't seem bad, but he's got this requirement that you need to play a card there next turn, and that's bad. I mean, 1-3 by itself with no extra ability isn't great. You know, it's a good stat line, but it's not like it synergizes with a deck. So if you have a deck that's really focused on synergy or combo, there's just not going to be room for him. And then you do need to meet the requirement. So unless you're in a zoo type deck, I mean, there is worry that you don't have a 2-drop or something to follow him up. And so if you play him on turn 1, you need to have something to follow him up just to make him a 1-3. Play him later in the game, you know, maybe he gets shut down or he doesn't have room, or he's just telling your opponent where you're going to play. So Hawkeye, like I said, one turn pool 3, he sees virtually no play, and I think it's for a very good reason. I don't know how they change him. I just think it's kind of a weird ability. It's kind of bad. You know, maybe they need more requirements to make it a 1-4 or something. I don't know. I just think a 1-3 and that's it. 1-3 that you have to work for. It's just underwhelming. There's so many better 1-drops out there in Marvel Snap right now. Another pretty underwhelming 1-drop is Elektra. She can kill a 1-drop, but you're only adding 1 power to your side. So unless you kill a really powered up Sunspot, I mean, if you're killing your opponent's 1-drop, that's a 1-2. Yeah, you remove 2 power from their board and you gave yourself 1. But this is a card slot in your deck, and it's going to be a card on your board, right? It's taking up 1 space on a location. It's just not worth it. You almost never want that, to take up a space on your location with just a 1 power card. So Elektra right now, she's just pretty weak. I think you could make her 1-2. I think that would be all right. I don't think she'd be overpowered. You could also keep her maybe as a 1-1, but make her destroy any 1 cost played before or after her. Okay, because the problem with Elektra is right now, if you're going first at the start of a game, even if your opponent plays a 1-drop, you can't kill it with Elektra because you're going first, right? She's going to reveal, and then your opponent's card is going to reveal. She needs some changes, either to be able to consistently kill 1-drops on turn 1, regardless if you're going first or not, or just be higher power. For 2-cost cards, we're looking at Medusa. Now, Medusa, when you first start Marvel Snap, is actually pretty strong. Okay, she sees a good amount of play in Pool 1. She's pretty strong in Pool 1, but then she falls off for a few reasons. Okay, first of all, yes, she can be a 2-cost 4-power card, which is a good stat line. Okay, but same problem with Hawkeye. It has no further synergy with a deck. I mean, it just doesn't. Okay, it doesn't really help out other cards or add to big effects. Even something like, you know, Odin or getting it triggered multiple times with Lockjaw, it's just not worth it. Okay, it's just adding 2 power. That's not going to stack up as much. You know, Angela is better for a card that can keep powering up. And at 2 costs, you've got Lizard. Lizard's a 2-5. Okay, he beats Medusa in terms of power, and you can play him on any lane. If you're in a game with Medusa and the middle lane is closed off, or you can't play a 2-cost there, she's just useless. Okay, you're playing a 2-2 with no ability in that case. And that's not very good. You know, even Lizard, even if your opponent fills their side of that location and he becomes a 2-2, he is still an ongoing card that can be buffed with Spectrum. Okay, and maybe even have cards to kill, you know, one of their 1-drops on that location or something. So Lizard's just much more versatile. Medusa, again, locking her down to middle location, big drawback. She's just not worth it. All right, looking at 3-drops. 3-drops are pretty good. I was going through this list and I'm like, man, these are good cards. None of them are absolutely terrible, I don't feel. I think they're all better than, Hawkeye, Elektra, Medusa, and the other cards I'm going over on this list. So good on 3-drops. It's a very, very strong cost. The cards I think maybe are the weakest here still, though, are the Punisher. Now, he's one of those cards like Medusa where he sees a lot of play in the early pools. Okay, pools 1 and 2, you will see Punisher a lot. He's also an ongoing, so he has that synergy going for him. But he's a 3-2 that can become a 3-6 if your opponent plays correctly for you. Okay, so he becomes a 3-6 if your opponent fills their board, which is their choice. Okay, the problem is we've got Captain America here, which also doesn't see too much play in Pool 3. He's a 3-power card that can give +1 power to your other 3 cards at a location, meaning he's a 3-6. Okay? So you got Captain America, who's a 3-6, and Punisher, who can be 3-6. But the problem is, Captain America, you gain his power by what you're playing. You're playing cards at that location to fill it up. The Punisher, you gain his power by your opponent playing cards there. And that's harder to do. Okay, you're relying on your opponent to meet the requirements of your card. Whereas Captain America, you're relying on yourself to meet the requirements of your card, in which case, you're going to have a deck built to meet those requirements. So the fact that Captain America and Punisher contribute the same total power to a lane is weird to me. Again, Punisher's is just harder to meet. It's just strictly harder to meet than Captain America's. They're both ongoings. They both get the same benefit from the likes of Spectrum or Onslaught. So Punisher, I think, should be a 3-3. Okay, he should be able to get up to 7 power. I think that's much more fair and obvious. Again, it needs your opponents playing to get full strength. Okay, and that's something that's out of your control. If we're looking at 4-cost cards, I'm actually giving this one a tie. I mean, we got some bad cards in here. 4-cost to me is maybe the worst cost in the game in terms of consistency and power of their cards. So many of them just seem kind of underwhelming. But we're giving the spot to Crystal. I mean, Crystal is just so bad. If you guys have never played against her, you've never seen her in a game, I'm not surprised because I don't know why you would play her. I own her. I don't think I've ever played her. She's just not very good. She's 4-cost, 4 power, which is weak. Okay, that's weak. If you have a 4-cost, 4 power, it better do something good. Okay, you look at Moon Girl. She duplicates your hand, which means she's giving you more cards, which is almost like card draw, which is very rare in Marvel Snap. She's synergizing with the likes of Devil Dino. She can duplicate your She-Hulk or your Death. I mean, she can be really, really strong. And Crystal will shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 3 cards. And I'm not sure what the point of that is. If you have a Mr. Negative deck, it's possible that this helps you, get out those cards. The problem is Mr. Negative is a 4-cost card. So you can't play them on the same turn. That would only work if you got Mr. Negative out early with the likes of Psylocke or Zabu. It's also possible that you shuffle your hand into your deck and you draw those same exact cards. Okay, it would be different if you're guaranteed to draw 3 new cards. Right, that means you would get 3 cards hit by Mr. Negative. But you could literally put your hand in your deck and draw the same cards. On turn 4, unless you have a zoo deck, you maybe have 3 cards in your hand. So you're going to put 3 in your hand into your deck and then draw 3. I mean, you're not gaining any cards there. Okay, she's not a huge card draw machine. I don't know the point of her. I really don't. I don't think, like I said, any deck runs her. I really don't know what you do with Crystal. I think you do a complete rework. I think you have to change her entirely, make something that makes sense or release new cards that synergize with her ability and then actually power her up, more than 4. Why they chose 4, I don't know. She sucks. Terrible. Worst card in the game right here, I believe, is Crystal. But at 4, I have to mention, just because we got some kind of wacky, wonky cards in here, I'm looking at Sentry. Okay, now I don't own Sentry right now. I just know he's bad because you never see him played, and I believe that's for a good reason. He's a 4/8, which is good. I mean, that is strong. We compare that to Crystal, right? He's twice that power. The weird thing is, you have to play him on the left or the middle lane, which already is a bit of a limitation. You may have a game where the left and the middle lane aren't easy to play on. Maybe you can only play 1, 2, or 3 cost cards on them. Maybe you can't play on them at all. Maybe the right lane is the only lane available. Okay, now you're in trouble here. But if you do get him down, he will, on reveal, add a -8 power void to the right location. Okay, so you're playing +8 power on the left or middle location, and the right one you're playing -8 power. Okay, you're netting 0 power unless you can get rid of this void. Obviously, you're going to try getting rid of the void with the likes of Viper, or you're going to eat it up with Carnage. You're going to do something to get rid of this void, or maybe just ditch the right location. And maybe the right location's full, and if it's full, then he's not going to add that void there. So if you had a kind of zoo type deck, then you're just slapping down 8 power. The problem is you could already do that with Jessica Jones in any lane. Okay, White Queen is 6 power, but she gives you some intel. You've got Crossbones, who is 8 power if you're, winning that location. I mean, there's just better options, and that 8 power really is just not enough to justify figuring out what to do with this void, and the fact that you can't play him at the right location. He needs some change. I don't know what you do. Maybe make him cheaper. I think that makes sense. 3/6 with a -6 void makes it easier to destroy him after, because right now you're going to be using your turn 5 or turn 6 to destroy or get rid of this void. It's really clunky. It's really awkward. You don't want to be using those big turns to deal with this, -8 power void. So for 5 cost cards, we've got 2 winners here again. Okay, now 5 cost is a pretty strong cost. I mean, we got some really heavy hitters here, really deck-defining cards, and they can really make or break a game. But we do have Ronan the Accuser, who is just bad. Okay, remember what I was saying about Punisher, where relying on your opponent to play a certain way is not good. Okay, it means if you're against a deck that just doesn't even have those type of cards, it's just not going to work. Okay, in terms of Ronan, if you're against a deck that always empties out their hand, has a bunch of cheap cost cards, he's just not going to work. And he's just a worse Devil Dino. Okay, it's like the Punisher compared to Captain America. I mean, look at this. We have a 5/3 +2 power for each card in your own hand versus a 5/3 +2 power for each card in your opponent's hand. Why they would make Ronan the exact same stat line as Devil Dinosaur, I have no idea. It makes 0 sense. You're relying on your opponent to have cards in their hand. It's just bad. Okay, and right now there are not tools for him. There's not cards that will add a bunch of cards to your opponent's hand. You've got Maximus, so you can play Ronan turn 5, Maximus turn 6. You're adding 2 cards to the hand. It's just not good. Okay, it's just not enough. Your opponent could also have a zoo type deck where they're just playing all their cards. So when you add 2 cards to their hand, maybe at the end of the game they have 2 or 3 cards in their hand. It'll make Ronan a 5/7. Or a 5/9 if you get that synergy. And if you don't have Maximus, he's going to be a 5/3 or 5/5. Okay, you're going to pay 5 cost for a 5 power card that has no other synergy in your deck. He's just not good. He needs a buff, and he needs also some tools and some other cards that can really synergize with him. Okay, Darkhawk, for example, has Rock Slide to add rocks to your opponent's deck to power up Darkhawk. Now, it does look like at some point Ronan will be getting cards added to really synergize with him. We just don't have anything in the game right now, so it'd be nice if Ronan just had more power, and then once those come into the game, if he's too strong, you take him down in power then. Okay, because right now he's sitting here, 0 play, nobody plays him, you won't see him, and you shouldn't even try him out if you own him. He is not worth it at all. Okay, another note I mentioned before, Black Ball's just not very good. Okay, he's a 5/8. That's a decent stat line. It's not amazing, but it is pretty good. Your opponent must discard the lowest cost card in their hand. it just doesn't do anything right now. Again, there's just not enough synergy. He just doesn't help. Okay, if you're playing a 5 cost, you want huge power or really good synergy with your deck. And Black Bolt doesn't have either of those. So he sees essentially no play right now with discard decks, especially popular in the meta because we got the season with MODOK here. He's worse because he could actually help your opponent discard a card that ends up being played or, powering up their other cards. So Black Bolt, again, he needs some kind of change. You can make him cheaper. I think his ability isn't the worst. It's kind of interesting. If you made him cheaper to where people could get out early, it's not as big of a commitment, and you could really hurt, your opponent's plays a little bit earlier, that could help. Because right now, you're playing turn 5. If your opponent has a 6-drop in their hand, it doesn't matter if you're discarding another low-cost card. Okay? He's really only good if your opponent has death or, something, She-Hulk or something that they, reduce the cost of. He's really just not worth it right now. And if we're looking at 6-cost cards, I got 2 winners here, and I don't actually own either of them. The first we're looking at is Agatha. Now, we all know Agatha's pretty troll. Okay, she is the meme card of Marvel Snap for good reason. She plays your cards for you. And it doesn't say it in her description, but she plays them very poorly. Okay, there's no rhyme or reason. She just plays what she can play. Okay, if there's a cost there, she'll play it if she's able to do so. The only real play she sees is in discard decks. You try to get Lady Sif to discard her early, and then you can bring her back, and that's a good 14 power, which works when it works. But when it doesn't, you're stuck with Agatha, and she will just lose you the game. So she's a meme card. She's a troll card. I actually like her, though. I think it's fun. Maybe you make her a bit more powerful just so you see her more often. I think it's kind of a fun aspect to the game that, people will let this card play for them. So maybe make it a bit more enticing, a 6/15 or something, and that would be interesting because she is a fun card. We've got Orca, though, who is not as fun and is just as bad. 6 costs, 14 power, if it's your only card here. That's a huge commitment. You've also got a card like Giganto, which can only be played at the left location. That is a limitation, but you could have other cards there. So with Orca, it's just not very good. You need to only commit to 2 lanes on your previous turns, and then turn 6, drop him alone. What if you've got locations that are hard to play on? What if you can only play on 2 locations for the entire game? Where you're going to play 4 cards on one of them and then just save the other one open for Orca? What if your opponent played more than 14 power there? Orca's not good enough now. He's not good. His power commitment is not worth it for 6 costs. It's the only thing you can do on your last turn, but make him a 6/10 base, something. Do something with Orca. He's just as bad as Agatha, but he's not nearly as fun or troll or memey. So those are my worst cards in Marvel Snap and what I would do to change them. Again, these cards, it's not just that, they seem bad or underwhelming or they don't perform compared to the level of, some of the most popular cards in meta decks. It's the fact that nobody's playing them. Okay, they're underplayed for a reason. And presumably, Second Dinner would want all their cards to be played to some extent. Okay, you want people trying out the cards, having fun, trying new decks. So these cards don't need to be made top tier, but you need to change them to where they're either competitive or where they just have abilities that synergize really well with some things, more obvious synergy, and they're fun to play around with. Again, I got Agatha on this list, but she actually sees some play, and it's very fun. It's funny when you're playing against Agatha and you find out at the end, these other cards need something interesting. Okay, they need to be competitive or they need to be really interesting, but right now they're neither. So let me know what you guys think are the worst cards right now in Marvel Snap in the comments down below.